These are the most painful mistakes managers make. I observed great leaders falling into these traps, and of course, as a manager myself, I've done every single one from this list. Once you become a manager, you have to learn tons of things. How to hire and fire, how to provide feedback to your team, delegate responsibilities and focus on the results instead of tasks. And you'll find these things in literally every training for a new manager. Today, I want to cover leadership mistakes that are not that obvious, or maybe I don't see people talking about them enough. Mistake number 1. You pretend to know what your team is talking about when in reality you don't. As manager, you most likely will have a team of experts under you. They know their job and most likely they know it better than you. And this is fine. As managers, we often sacrifice the depth of knowledge in favor of the wider outlook on things. That's why we need to trust experts that work for us. But that's not always easy. We are often raised in a culture where it's kind of embarrassing to admit that you don't know something or you don't understand something. And if you occupy a leadership position, it makes it 10 times worse. You're sitting in a room with your team and you're scared to ask about a term that you don't understand, because what would they think if their manager doesn't know this simple and obvious thing? So it pushes us to pretend that we understand things that we actually don't. But here's a surprise. Experts can say if you understand the topic or not. Based on the questions you ask, they make their own judgments on your level of understanding, because they're not stupid. And when they see that you're not actually in context, that your opinions and directions are shallow, they most likely won't respect you as a manager. It is indeed uncomfortable to show that we don't get something. It makes us feel vulnerable. And even if we do that, we still won't get this depth of knowledge that experts has. But trust me, the alternative of pretending that you get it is much worse. Mistake number 2. Wait for someone to fix the culture in your team. We are human beings and we want to work in the environment we enjoy. If you found yourself in, for example, toxic environment, it's a problem. But if you're a manager of the team with a toxic environment, that's a different challenge. First of all, let's establish this. Culture is not a fixed thing. It can form naturally, or it can be created, but it is possible to influence and shape the culture to give it the form that you need. If we are just employees, we don't manage anyone, we're not directly responsible for a team's culture. I mean, if we're naturally proactive, we can do that, but it's not that it's expected from us. What I think no one tells managers is that working on the team's culture is actually a part of our job. Of course, you can have support of HR or your higher management, and in the end you need to have a buy-in from your team. But I saw too many managers struggling with the bad team culture and not doing anything about that because they expected someone else to appear and fix it for them. You see, if you like it or not, your actions influence your team. They sense your attitude and can pick it up with time. If your behavioral strategy is to, let's say, go with the flow, you won't change the culture. You won't affect behavioral patterns of people around you. As a manager, you are the role model. And I understand it's not easy. We're all social creatures, and to show the behavior that deviates from the behavior of the group requires a courage and a good level of self-awareness. But I think the most important step is to admit that the culture is something you create. If you want to make your work more fun, it is in your power as a manager to make it. There is another layer here, because not every enjoyable working culture serves company strategy and company's goals. But that's a lecture for another time. Mistake number 3, and this one is by far my favorite. Appear overloaded to prove to your team that managerial job is actually hard. I mean, I can bet you've heard things like, managers are just busy with talking, or our boss is doing nothing and we as a team are doing the hard work. And it's true, there are managers who are over-delegating all the actual work to their teams and basically chill when everyone else is busy. If we as employees observe these irresponsible managers, later in our career, when we become managers ourselves, ourselves, we're kind of scared to appear the same. We feel the urge to prove to our teams that we are as hardworking as they are, we are as busy as they are. Then you work long hours and you complain about you being overloaded to your team. So instead of showing our teams an example of a work-life balance and a healthy work approach, we teach them to overwork, to get miserable, and all this for an imaginary approval from their side, for no one to blame you that you're not hardworking enough. But why is this happening in the first place? Well, a big part of managerial job is indeed sometimes hidden from the team, and it can create the impression that manager is busy with God knows what. So instead of appear more overloaded, you can, for example, try to be more open and transparent with your team. Share with them what you're doing, give them a sneak peek of what managerial responsibilities actually look like. In the end, this will create a healthier connection between you and your team. Mistake number 4. Over-focusing on your peers and managers and neglecting your team. Have you ever met managers who are very good at keeping their leaders happy, but don't care much about the ones who are below them? When we are employees, when we're only responsible for our own work, we only manage stakeholders on our level and up. We know what our managers expect from us, and we're getting horizontally aligned with our peers or people in our team. But from the moment you become manager, you now have people that you have to manage on your level, above and below. If we will keep acting like we used to, we would still focus only on this horizontal level and our management and won't put enough attention to our actual team. This is actually a classical dilemma I think every manager is facing. Where to put more energy and efforts into pleasing your leaders or supporting your team. Because if you fail to meet expectations from your management, to put it nicely, you most likely won't succeed. And if your team doesn't show good result because you don't support them enough, well, you won't succeed either. Mistake number 5. Discount introverted team members. Yes, I'm talking about this again and I won't stop talking about it. Corporate world favors extroverts and celebrates extroverted qualities. So managers sometimes tend to give more attention to employees who are more vocal and who are more visible. Maybe not even intentionally, but they tend to not notice a more reserved and introverted team members as often as the rest if a manager is not self-aware enough. It has multiple consequences. In a modern working culture, diversity is valued for a reason. If you fail to recognize the contribution that has been made by this more reserved or introverted team member, first and foremost, you are missing the opportunity to get another professional opinion. And you're simply discouraging this person to contribute further. Mistake number 6. Instead of empowering, you poke the team with a stick. I mean, why bother giving your team ownership, explain them the goals and empower if you can just tell them what to do until they do that? Well, the biggest drawback is if you only rely on your direct commands, you will have to do this all the time. And also, your team will never feel trusted. Of course, if you have a team of juniors, it requires a more directive management style. But if we want a really strong team of people, experts who are professionally comfortable, instead of pushing them to do something, we have to empower them, give them authority, autonomy, and allow them to make decisions themselves. Finally, mistake number 7. Act as a friend instead of acting as manager. There is nothing wrong with being friendly and open with your team and build a relationship based on trust and respect. But crossing the line between being manager subordinates and being friends can be dangerous for several reasons. When you become close friends with your direct reports, it mixes the personal and professional. It is harder to give an honest feedback. It is harder to make tough decisions. It can lead to biases, favoritism, and confidentiality issues. I don't know, for example, you told your direct reports as a friend that another team member didn't do that well on the last performance review. And other team members will sense that, and it will create this weird group dynamic where people don't feel equally treated. And it doesn't mean that you should never make friends at work. I became friends with many of my former colleagues, and they were both my managers and my subordinates. But I remember how hard it actually was to keep everything professional while we were still occupying these roles. And remember, managers have more power than their subordinates. That's why the responsibility on keeping this boundary is mostly on managers. Yes, just because we are more influential. Alright, these were 7 leadership mistakes that I want to share with you today. I hope that was helpful, and the best of luck on your journey.